organizations within the healthcare sector. Presently, I serve as the president of Prospanica Chicago. I hold an MBA from DePaul's Calstat Graduate School of Business. And my real passion is developing talent through coaching and recruiting while fostering opportunity. So I'm excited to kick this off today. So let's just jump right in. Just to give you a little high-level overview of today's roadmap. First, we'll explore why engaging recruiters is so critical. Then we'll break down into 3 phases: preparing before the fair, engagement during the event, and follow-up afterwards. And then finally, I'll be showing you some examples of some templates that I created that you can walk away with and start putting it into action. So let's get started. So why does this even matter? When we talk about engagement, when we think about virtual career fairs, why is this such an important consideration? According to LinkedIn, many online sources say the vast majority of jobs, as many as 80%, are never advertised to the public. Furthermore, the studies show that 80% of jobs coming through networking are done through networking, not just application. And as you might guess, recruiters like myself are very busy sifting through hundreds of candidates. So by engaging them proactively as a candidate, you're demonstrating initiative and professionalism, which is one very big way you can set yourself apart amongst those hundreds of candidates that recruiters are sifting through. When you think about virtual career events, I would argue that virtual career events level the playing field. They give you a direct line to recruiters, and in some cases, hiring managers who are participating in these events, if you know how to use these opportunities, which we'll talk to in later slides. So let's talk about preparing for the event. I would argue this is probably where you'll spend most of your time as you're thinking through what is your objective when you're preparing for the virtual career fair. Preparation is key. First and foremost, research. Start by researching the companies that you know will be present at the job fair. Companies like Lilly or CVS or AbbVie, these are names, big box names that we already know will be present at the event. But if you have a general idea on where you'd like to pursue a career in any of these organizations, you'll want to try to get your head wrapped around as much information that you can get your hands on about the organization. So you've got a wealth of resources that are available to you, their websites, their LinkedIn pages, their job postings. And as we all know, AI has a wealth of resources that can help accelerate that research process to help shape your overall goal when going into the event. Secondly, the next important step that sometimes is overlooked is making sure that you're polishing your LinkedIn profile. When you think about your LinkedIn profile, I usually emphasize 3 areas out of the gate. One is your picture, the other is your headline, and the other is the summary. These are 3 areas as a recruiter my eyes are naturally drawn to as I'm sifting through potential candidates through my search. So let's talk a little bit about the headshot. I think most of us would agree that it's critical that you have a clear professional headshot. I think that's essential. So no animal pictures, no nature pictures, no family pictures. You want to keep those to other platforms like Facebook or Instagram. Right now, you're focused on building a clear professional job profile on LinkedIn that recruiters are going to be drawn to. So if you don't have a professional headshot, I highly recommend you invest either a little money to get one done or add one that you've already taken especially prior to the event. The second area I mentioned was the headline. Headlines make it so much easier for recruiters like myself to be able to sift through those candidates that appear to be more ambitious than the others. Writing a headline like aspiring marketing professional, passionate about brand strategy. Very key in attracting the attention of potential recruiters looking for folks in the marketing arena. And then finally summarizing your skills. So the summary section is a great way to highlight some key elements of your background, your experience. Again, your goal here is to attract the attention of a recruiter, but also it's a good indicator on a high-level overview of what you bring to the table. And last but not least, you want to practice a 30-second pitch. And I know as you're thinking, well, this is a virtual event, it may not be as necessary. This is a great opportunity to really prepare yourself and knowing exactly what you're going to say, how you're going to say it when the opportunity arises. And it doesn't have to be very complex. It could be something as simple as, hi, my name is AJ. I'm a recruiter with experience hiring medical doctors in oncology. I'm excited to learn about Lilly because I noticed there are a couple talent acquisition opportunities I'd love to learn more about. So again, you want to keep it short. You want to keep it concise. You want to keep it professional. And obviously being prepared makes it so much easier, not only for yourself, but the people that you'll be interacting. And then finally, as you're doing your research, as you're finalizing and optimizing your LinkedIn profile, and you have an idea of your pitch, this is where we start talking about what can I send proactively as I'm narrowing in on my target people that I'd like to engage, and start creating some ideas on LinkedIn messaging that you'd like to send out before the affair. And I'll show you some examples in the following slides. So again, just to recap, when you think about preparing for the event, you want to focus on the research. You want to optimize your LinkedIn profile, and you want to have a crafty, enticing 30-second elevator pitch at hand, ready to go as you prepare to start engaging people. And then finally, your messaging should sort of carry over on the brand that you're building through this process. So here, I just wanted to show a quick example of AI. In this case, I'm using ChatGPT. It doesn't have to be complex. The prompts can be as detailed and focused as you'd like. But here in this example, I just wanted to show you how simple it was to type a very basic prompt, giving some context on the event, what you're hoping to accomplish, and asking the AI exactly what you want in terms of research. So here I'm simply asking ChatGPT, I'm preparing to attend Prospanica's virtual career fair. I want a job at Lilly, who will be attending the event. Provide a business overview of the current state of business. And within seconds, you have a pretty robust profile in a process that used to take us a little bit of time to start piecing together. So here you've got some historical information about Lilly, when it was founded, some key financial performance and projections. You've even got their product portfolio and some of the drugs that are approved and the disease states that they treat. And then finally, here are some great examples of career opportunities and news events that are currently present. So again, leverage these free resources to help the entire process. But this is just one example I wanted to show you and how you can leverage those tools as you prepare for the upcoming event. And I mentioned sending a pre-fair message. So this is an example of a message that I would send to a recruiter who I have learned that will be attending the event. And so just wanted to break down some key elements of the message as you're crafting your own based on what your objective is, and reasoning behind the email format. So first and foremost, just like the headline on LinkedIn, the subject line. This is the first thing that people will see when they have an email. And in some cases, when they're looking at their inbox, that's all they see is the subject line. So our objective here is to entice the person on the other side, whether that's the recruiter or the hiring manager themselves, with a very clear, engaging subject line. So in this example, I was very straightforward. I'm looking forward to connecting before, and here's where you would enter in the career fair name. Again, it's short, it's sweet, it grabs the attention, and it sets a positive tone. And secondly, I would argue it signals intent and relevance, which would likely increase the chances of the recruiter opening that message. Why does it work? Simply put, personally speaking, it's concise, it's personalized, and I get the impression that this person is very interested in learning more about the organization. So I might prioritize this email to respond to over others that aren't as compelling. The second part of this email is the greeting itself. What is the purpose of this, of your email, of your communication, whether it's an email or a LinkedIn message? Starting with a hi, recruiter name or hiring manager name. You want to keep it professional, yet approachable. And this aligns really great with LinkedIn's semi-formal tone. But again, you definitely want to always err on the conservative side by keeping it professional, yet approachable. And why does it work? Using their name, something as simple as their name, it shows an effort that you went out of your way to do some research to find out who this individual was. And it helps to build that immediate connection. Moving on to the opening line. I'm genuinely excited to see Lily at the Prospanica virtual career event. It conveys enthusiasm, it conveys flattery toward the company, making the recruiter feel valued. Why does that work? Simply put, genuine excitement stands out, in a sea of generic messages that I know each and every one of you have probably received. But in this case, being creative, but individualizing your communication definitely would set you apart amongst others. And then, of course, the body of the email. There's a couple key elements. How do I state my interest? And how do you state your value proposition? So in this example, I'm genuinely excited to see Lily at the career fair. I'm passionate about recruiting and would love to connect with you beforehand to explore how my background in recruiting medical physicians could contribute to your team's success. I'm eager to hear more about your company, its goals, and any upcoming opportunities. So again, here you're recognizing the organization, you're indicating that you've done your research, but you're also starting to build in your value proposition. You've indicated your skill set. You sort of hinted at where you're focused on, which is drawing the individual in. And then last and certainly not least is the call to action. So what is it that you're trying to entice the other person to act on as a next step? In this example, out of the gate, don't be shy. Could we schedule a quick chat before the event? Or would you prefer I stop by your booth early? Looking forward to your thoughts. It's clear, it gives an idea on next steps, and it's flexible. And why it works? A call to action is critical. If you're not indicating any type of action that you'd like the other person to move on, your email may stand stagnant. And so you want to at least give some room to allow the other person to take action on your email. And then last but not least, your sign off. Again, as a recruiter, I've seen various creative ways to close communications. My recommendation, again, I always err to conservative. And so best regards is universal, it's professional, and it's even standard in LinkedIn if you're sending these messages through that platform. Overall, your goal is to send a simple and polished impression without overcomplicating the message. So now that you've done your research, you have a general idea of the recruiters that you're going to focus on, or even hiring managers. Now the big day is here, and it's a virtual career event. First impressions count. I've been on, during the pandemic, I had the joy of doing hundreds of interviews on Zoom. And I can tell you, first impressions count. The number of times I've had individuals show up, believe it or not, in pajamas or some unprofessional wear, it was more than I'd want to count. But as you're thinking about your own experience and the success that you want to get out of it, you want to take this part seriously. So, just to give you some backdrop, according to a Princeton University article on first impressions, it takes just 1/10 of a second for people to judge someone and make a first impression. And so three very pointed areas I wanted to focus on: be professional. So I know it's a virtual career event. You don't have to get dressed up, but I would say at a minimum, you should be dressing business casual, and spending some time to test your mic and your camera. Unfortunately, I've been witness to a number of different times, unfortunate circumstances where the candidate clearly didn't test any of their technology before the event and wasted 10 15 minutes just getting through. And so when you get the dress code locked down, make sure you're testing all your technology as well. Secondly is prepare smart questions. Again, this goes back to the work that you did in research. The example I gave was around Lilly. So it would be great to have some questions that may be focused on some of their product lines and their disease states, any recent news articles, whatever you feel is appropriate to the goal that you're trying to achieve. You'll want to have some canned, smart questions prepared as you're engaging your people. You can keep it general, but again, the more focused, the more prepared, I think will gain greater results during the process. And then as you're having these conversations, take notes, jot down names, jot down details. They'll definitely come in handy later in the post-career communications. However, if you're like me, you also have technology resources, note-taking, AI tools that you can leverage that will notate the conversations for you. If you're not an old school note taker, definitely take advantage of those. Regardless of what medium you use, you'll want to jot down, some of that key intelligence that you're getting during these conversations, especially names. The more names you can acquire, the more people that you can connect at your target company. And then lastly, in closing, before you leave, again, a call to action. So may I follow up with you on LinkedIn? or can I connect with you on LinkedIn? May I have your email? I'd love to send you my resume. You want to keep the doors open. And so I want you to walk away remembering your goal during these conversations is to end uh, with a next steps, with a critical action. That way, you'll have some key target individuals that you can focus on later. But again, you're continuing to expand your network in your target company. And then finally, our post-fair follow-up. This honestly is where most candidates drop the ball. You just spend 4 hours at an event. You've spoken with 10 to 15 different companies. You've jotted down some names, but you had no follow-up. And so the time we spent during the research is probably about the same amount of time you want to spend on the post-fair follow-up, whether it's LinkedIn connections, LinkedIn in-mails, direct emails. I'll show you some examples of that in the following slide. But this is a step that you don't want to lose out on the opportunity while your name and that connection are fresh. So overall, the recommendation is, to get those messages out within 24 to 48 hours. I'll show you some examples of some very simple emails, but sending LinkedIn requests like, "Hi, I'm AJ. It was great meeting you at the Prospanica virtual event. I enjoyed learning about XYZ. This is where your notes come in handy." Then you can email them, "Dear so-and-so, thank you for discussing the recruiting job with me at the Prospanica virtual career event. I'm excited about the upcoming drug that's being approved and is in phase 3 clinical trials and would love to stay in touch." Just some key examples there. The key here is you want to keep the relationship, you want to keep that connection alive. And when you don't have access to them personally, you want to leverage the mediums that you do have access to, which is LinkedIn and email. So keep that connection active as much as you can. And again, if you don't hear back, give it a week. As you could imagine, as a recruiter who's attending these events, we're speaking with hundreds of people. And so when we do come back, sometimes it can take a few days to get caught up from being out of office and working with those folks that we met or interviewed. So it's a delicate balance where you don't want to be overly aggressive. So general guideline is once you've sent out your communications, I would wait about a week. I would consider a week, maybe 5 business days, and then try again. Persistent essentially just pays off. But again, you'll want to try to find that healthy balance. So here again, we have another example of an email. This could be a LinkedIn in-mail as well, but the format is typically the same. So here you have your subject line. In this example, I changed it to "excited to follow up from Prospanica virtual career event." I think this reflects sort of a pre-event outreach, but it also maintains that energy and that relevance. As far as the tone, we shifted to a proactive, forward-looking vibe. Example: excited to follow up and deepen my enthusiasm. These all align with the pre-fair context, assuming the meeting was hypothetical or based on prior research. You want to be specific. Here, kept specific detail as a placeholder. Replace it with something unique like a project or a value to show attentiveness. And of course, a call to action. Um, Added options here, a quick call, asking about the application process. You want to make it actionable but flexible, but your goal is to encourage a response, keep that connection, that momentum continuing to build. Because ultimately your version or your purpose in this email is to build that rapport, to highlight interest, and the positions really present you as someone as taking initiative. And secondly, it does a great job in helping you stand out, especially before and after the career fair. So some key takeaways as you consider some of the things that we discussed this evening. You want to start early by building those relationships before the event. You do this through your research. You do this by establishing some target recruiters or even hiring managers that you know that work at this company. You want to stand out, and you do that by being professional, proactive. Again, the more you can communicate what you know about your target organization, the more you'll tend to stand out. And then, of course, the follow up. You'll want to keep those connections warm. And at some point, the goal is to turn those connections into opportunities. And so, with that said, I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for questions. And so let's take a look here. So here I have a question. Would you recommend reaching out to recruiters or company representatives before the events start or wait until after? So again, I would say both. Sometimes you don't have that information before, but if you do, if you know, a great way to sort of figure out who's attending those events are taking a look at presenter names, and then start from that point forward. But if you do have the opportunity to know some of the key players that are going to be there, I highly recommend you reach out to them, not only before, but before and after. Another question here. What are the common mistakes candidates make after a virtual career fair when following up with recruiters? um, the one mistake that always stands out are the canned resumes and canned cover letters. What do I mean by that? It's not difficult to know that when I receive a resume that is totally irrelevant to what I'm looking to hire. And so going back to what we discussed earlier, the more you can individualize yourself and communicate what you know about the organization will definitely set you apart. Because too many candidates, unfortunately, as great as Indeed is, a lot of candidates are using one resume to apply for everything, whether it's an individual contributing role or a management role, and it's very evident. When you've been doing this for 15 years, it's pretty clear. So I highly recommend to be as individualized as you can and speak to the target that you're communicating with. Next question. As a job seeker, how can I identify the right recruiters to connect with at a virtual career fair? Great question. Personally, what I would recommend, I would start by creating a list of all the companies that you know that will be present. And as you're refining your overall objective on what you're trying to accomplish at this fair, so for example, I'm definitely planning to try to identify my next job. I know my job is in talent acquisition. So now I have the list of target organization. The next thing that I honestly would do, I would go straight into ChatGPT and see what names ChatGPT can provide me by simply putting in, I'm targeting Lily as a potential employer. I'm trying to find a job in Chicago, Illinois. Provide any known names of recruiters that are hiring in that region. It may come back with 0 results, or it may come back with some names that are dated, a few months old. But I would start with AI first, and then I would transition over to LinkedIn. I would go to the company LinkedIn page, and there's an option under people on the LinkedIn page where you can actually start seeing anyone who has listed that employer under that list. And there's filters on there. You can search by title, function. You can be creative with some of the filters, but between AI and LinkedIn, you could very likely you can narrow down some recruiters, even though they're outside of the core area you're focusing on, they tend to forward you to the right point of contact. But great question. Next question. Is it better to attend smaller sessions with niche recruiters or try to connect with larger companies that may have more competition? So niche recruiters or connect with larger companies that may have more competition. Well, like I said earlier, I think it's all about making connections and establishing relationships. I think your odds of being successful in doing that will likely be in smaller sessions. So I don't want to say one is better than the other. I would probably prioritize the smaller sessions first and then work my way up to the larger companies who might have more competition. Again, my recommendation just based off of experience, but that would be the approach that I would recommend. Next question. How can job seekers prepare to discuss their salary expectations if asked during a virtual career fair? That's the $1 million question. I'll start out by saying, in most cases and in a lot of states, legally the companies can't ask you what you're currently making. So if you think about it from that perspective, whatever you disclose is what the organization will walk away with. And so it's that dance you're having. You don't want to put your cards on the table and limit yourself because you may not know what the salary range is. So I would answer this question in 2 different ways. If you don't know the salary ranges, I would emphasize your negotiable. If you establish that benchmark, it's going to be hard to negotiate around that. So again, if you don't know the salary ranges, I would try to keep your expectations by saying I'm negotiable. I'm more excited about the opportunity and the organization. I would go that route. If you do know the salary expectations, which a lot of companies are mandated to post on their job postings, I always shoot high. Why not shoot high? So I would recommend, indicating your salary expectations towards the higher end and negotiate backwards from there. Obviously, during the interview, they're not going to have that discussion. They're just taking a small, honestly, let me back up. Most recruiters, when they're asking that question, they're trying to figure out if they can afford you. And so whether or not you know the salary ranges, that's the dance you're playing with. So again, if you don't know salary ranges, recommend negotiable. when you do know salary ranges, I would recommend higher end. Just my recommendation. Any number would suffice. If salary isn't something as critical for you, you can be very transparent and share what you're currently making. But those are just my two suggestions. The next question, how can I ask about growth opportunity without sounding like I am not going to be loyal to the position I am currently trying to apply? That's an interesting question. So a couple of things come to mind. I would answer again two different ways. The first scenario would be dependent on the role itself. Usually when you're applying to position, you have a general idea of potential growth opportunity. And in some cases, that position will likely be limited in terms of future growth potential. On the other side, about an organization that has a clear career path that you would like to work through as you progress in your career. And so what I usually would recommend in that case is emphasizing your ambition to be a lifelong learner and adding value to the organization. So one way to consider responding to that, a recruiter may ask you, what are you looking for in your next job opportunity? And, one way I would answer it is, I'm looking for an opportunity where I can stretch my current experience, but also create a way to advance in more responsibility, whether that's title or whether that's laterally. I don't think it's a bad thing to express your ambition. This is one of those questions that you'll have to take into context during the conversation. But most companies I've recruited for, we are looking for people that have that ambition. The average tenure in this generation tends to be, 2, maybe 3 years before they move on if they're not promoted. And so, as a recruiter, when I'm looking at resumes, I'm looking at the trend, how is this person progressing? And so I think naturally any organization is going to want someone that's ambitious and wants to grow. So I don't see growth and wanting to grow and loyalty connecting. But I understand the question. But yeah, I would be transparent, share your ambitions, and it's important to set that expectation up front. So you want to understand what that career path is. So maybe reframing the question rather than focusing on what does the growth opportunity look like. Maybe consider asking it another way. What is a typical career path for someone in this position? So out of that, you should get an idea of what that would look like. But again, my recommendation. And it looks like that is the end of our questions. So let me close us out. Awesome. Okay, so as we conclude today's webinar, we want to sincerely thank each of you for joining us this session. Our hope is that the insights shared today have provided you some effective strategies for connecting with recruiters, whether it's crafting those introductory messages or follow up and leaving a lasting impression. A very special thanks to Prospanica National, not only for their support, but for their ongoing commitment to supporting professionals in their career growth. We motivate you to take the techniques discussed today and begin applying them as you engage with recruiters and build valuable professional connections that can open up doors to exciting career opportunities. With that, we want to extend an invitation to participate in our virtual career fair. The event will be held on April 9th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a great opportunity, and it'll offer a great chance to connect with top employers like Edward Jones, Lilly, AbbVie, Constellation Brands, and explore different career paths. So be sure to scan the QR code on the screen to register now and quickly. And additionally, if you can join us tomorrow on April 3rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for our next webinar, asking the right questions, engaging recruiters at the career fair, that would be great. And last but not least, thank you again for your time. And we look forward to seeing you at the career fair. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.